All right, we are recording for chapter 9 of The Password is Courage, which. So it is, as I said in the previous one, that the reason they were caught was the Bulgarian eagle on their passes was reversed. Well, or rather, the head was facing the wrong way. It is mentioned, though, that this apparently had been caught earlier and was just phoned ahead, or maybe was somebody looked at him and like, yeah, okay, but then thought about it more, was like, wait a minute, let me check. Yeah, that's the wrong thing. Calling ahead picked them up. Um, and the adventure does not stop here. Although it is, yeah, they're caught. They're not going to escape. And they did try to continue to claim to be Bulgarian. Did not work, much because of that. But they would then eventually moved to a smaller camp at Stuttgart, which was described as basically a stable. That the only reason why it had been converted into this makeshift camp is because it was surrounded by barbed wire. Now, also, I forgot to mention, I'm pretty sure this would also be considered illegal, but it's not really pointed out too much, is after he and Connolly were caught, they were then placed in a room and beaten. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to do that. But, it's... You can kind of understand that happening. What happens at Stuttgart, though, not so much. So, they... Yes, this was all at Stuttgart, no. Okay. They were beaten. This is before going to Stuttgart. They were beaten, then taken to a castle and put into a room with no light, no food, no water, and one of them would have to be awake all the time because by walking around making noise, it would keep the rats away from them. Again, this would not be appropriate. Holding an appropriate way to hold them. Finally, after 2 days of no food and water, they were given some. Not much, but still something. And then the door behind the gate, on the door, the little window door, that was left open so they had some light, and not much, but some. And then finally they were removed from there to Stuttgart. Now at Stuttgart, they were, or maybe this was still all at Stuttgart, but a different area. It's a stable that was converted because it was surrounded by barbed wire, so already kind of fortified. And they were not alone there. There were many, many prisoners, such that when in the room, there was so little space that for warmth and comfort, you would basically have to be sit down with somebody at your back, but also at night, you would be against each other like puzzle pieces, such that if you wanted to turn, the whole row would have to turn. There were also, food consisted of a raw turnip, once a day it sounded like, and for a latrine, it was that corner in the room. Yeah, none of this is good. But making it worse, and probably this I can believe is the thing that when Coward finally got his opportunity to do something about it, did take it. Because I was like, yeah, bad conditions are bad conditions. You do expect that, hey, we are the enemy, even though, yes, they do have certain responsibilities towards us. Yes, we do have certain rights, and we're still their enemy that can do nice things to us. The fact that at midnight, multiple days in a row, one of the Unter officers, which, bit of an aside here, one thing, because I'm reading on the Kobo, I didn't realize it would do it, but I figured, let me try. Because it is a nice feature on any e-reader, at least any e-reader I've been familiar with, that you can highlight a word and it will pull up a dictionary. What was really neat is because we have like a weird wobble. No, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. But Unterofficer, which I've been seeing before, and I've just been interpreting that as like under officer, which not entirely sure what rank that is, but it's like, okay, under officer. I actually did it on that and also on the other, which, as I said, I'm not going to try pronouncing that word. And there's, in English, no answer. But there's Deutsch English, so German to English. It's like, give me that. Oh, cool. It actually translates that apparently Unterofficer would be like a corporal. The other word warble, it's, again, I shouldn't be trying to pronounce it. It's apparently just like a private, like a low, just a soldier. Anyway, this Unterofficer calls to him because he's asking for the English sergeant. So, alright, the coward gets up, comes over to the door. What is it? Dude spits in his face, slams the door. And he does this multiple days in a row. In fact, on the last day that he does it, it was even a calling him out into the corridor. So now he is seen by multiple German guards. This guy does it again. And Coward doesn't react beyond wiping it off and returning. But he knows, oh, I'm going to get this guy. So, because it's like, you have to do something. Like, that is completely and utterly inappropriate. Like, that is bad enough. And it is kind of what happens later, but that's bad enough. That's the kind of thing that if you had a honorable and high enough officer witness that dude would totally be court-martialed and potentially thrown in jail. Because you do not, that would be considered contrary to a lot of international law, and I believe even German of higher ups would be like, yeah, no, you never treat a prisoner that way. Anyhow. So, and for anyone wondering, well, why would Coward keep getting up? Well, he was being called for, so you don't want to press it. And it's also potentially he was getting the orders to finally be moved out of Stuttgart. And back to Lambsdorff, where he, that is his Stalag, his POW camp of record, so he'd have to be transferred back there. So it would be kind of like if somebody broke out of a prison, which by the way, prison and jails are different things, but broke out of prison in New York, was captured in Pennsylvania, let's say, they might be held temporarily in a Pennsylvania jail before being transported back to their original prison in New York. But what ends up happening shortly after this is all the prisoners in Stuttgart are brought out. Oh, I forgot to mention one other thing. I do want to mention this. They put him in non-civilian clothes. Well, they didn't have British clothes for him. They gave both of them, him and Connolly, old German uniforms. And they beat up Coward because the German uniform, and it was like World War I era is what they were kind of mentioning, but apparently at least Coward's was updated because it had the Eagle of the Third Reich on there, and so he was removing it. And somebody saw that, the German saw that, and came over and beat the crap out of him for it. And he had to wave off Connolly not to do anything. Because Connolly was about to, but it's one of those things where that's weird. Because I get the whole, you don't disrespect our symbol. I get that. But at the same time, and maybe this is just how I am, and it's like no military experience. I don't think the military would have found me very useful. But if I saw a POW in an American uniform, like as American, saw an American uniform with our insignia on there, and he was trying to remove them, I'd help him remove them. Because it's like, yeah, that being on you, I recognize that's disrespectful to you, but even I may be like, yeah, I find that disrespectful. I don't want my symbols on a POW. Because you potentially are my enemy, that you still oppose me so much, I don't want that association on you. And you also certainly shouldn't want the money. I'd be helping, not beating the crap out of somebody. If he took it and then was disrespecting it, that's one thing. But this is like, he's removing it from the uniform. I'd help. Like, here's the bayonet, I will cut it off for you. And it's like, and then maybe have to dispose of it with respect. But it's like, yeah, no, that makes no sense to me. Why he would be why a dude would react that way? I mean, just unless he was unless he was concerned, somebody would think he wasn't concerned enough. Or if he was really buying into all the propaganda and such. But anyway, all the prisoners are brought out, lined up, because there's an inspection going on. And by the way, I'm pretty sure that I remember an inspection like this occurring. I thought that there is another one that my memory for it was a different location. So maybe this happens again, something like this happens again, or I just am misremembering where it was. We got two older German generals that are doing this inspection, which, I mean, makes sense. I mean, they are potentially retired, but they would still be loyal to Germany. And to be clear, loyal to Germany, not necessarily Nazis, but because this would be the case for plenty of the people in Germany, that their loyalty was to Germany, to the nation. They wouldn't necessarily agree with the Nazis, but they still wanted Germany to win because they are loyal Germans. So this would be like, so it would make sense that the German military would find a use for them still, even if, yeah, you're not actually commanding anything. But we can have you do these inspections, take care of things like that. Kind of ceremonial position. And I do think that for how it's written in there, my own interpretation is it was mainly because of the being spat in the face repeatedly. That when the German generals were walking by for the inspection, I mean, first, when they just appeared, Howard stepped forward and immediately he got kicked back into line. Because one of those things where, yeah, of course we're going to abuse you, but you're not supposed to say anything about that. You're supposed to let us do it. But the moment that the generals get like right in front of him, he steps up. So it's like, you cannot hit me back without them seeing, which is itself an abuse that they're inspecting to make sure isn't happening. And one of the Germans, he does speak good English, is like, I will hear your complaints, which is immediately making the German guards around there very uncomfortable. So, yeah, and he does indeed take him into the commandant's office, and there, Coward goes through all of it with the spitting in the face, the inappropriate accommodations, lack of a latrine, all that, lack of food. And yeah, the elderly officer smiled slightly at the vigor of the story, then spoke sharply, which I think that the vigor of it is in part the idea that somebody who would be able to go through these things with a passion to is most likely telling the truth. But yeah, very well, I am satisfied that your complaints should be investigated, and you have my word as a German officer that any wrongs will be put right. Furthermore, I will see that you return to your Stalag as soon as possible. I apologize for the behavior of the guards. In wartime, we cannot always employ the best of men in the Wehrmacht. Oh wait, hang on just a second. Feldwebel. No, Werbel. Something like that. I'm just gonna get that translation here. Because that was the word I couldn't... Sergeant, okay. Now, so it's like, okay, great. So I can go. And also the whole... It does seem... The fact that it's been in there about, I'll make sure you return to your Stalag. I find that interesting because that suggests to me that it was this was supposed to be you're here for a few days until there's a train ready to take you. So him being there so much longer, or even like hours, it's like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. We're not supposed to be holding that many people here. But anyway, before Coward leaves, the German goes on to say, the general, one moment. I have spent many years of my life in London. Sergeant Major Coward and I've spent many years of my life in London, Sergeant Major Coward, and I can assure you that this war was not of my choosing. Naturally, perhaps, I hold that Germany is in the right, but I would not wish that any of you British men should emerge from these bitter years thinking that all we Germans are bad enemies. Who knows, perhaps after all this is over, you will be able to say you met some Germans who treated their prisoners in a humane manner and kept to the code of honorable warfare. Which... There's a lot captured in both statements from the German general here, because yes, there is equal truths in what he was saying there, that they don't always have the best of men, because it is wartime. You take who you can get, and some of them are people you wouldn't want to actually be in those positions, but that's who you have. But at the same time, you can also have the people that no, there is supposed to be an honor to this as well, that you do treat people with certain respect. And failure to do so is supposed to be punished. It is not supposed to be encouraged. I feel like there was something else. Oh, yeah, that's right. When he was in there, he encountered a Frenchman that had... Somehow he managed to get through the search keeping his papers that included actual passes, like not forged passes, real passes. And Coward managed to convince him to give them up. And he also gave him a cigarette for them, but then sewed them into his pants. And he actually managed to get these all the way back to Lambsdorff, because even though they were going to inspect his pants, he managed to convince them that they're infested with lice, and so the Germans didn't want to touch them. I don't quite remember how that's going to come to be important, but it certainly will be. Okay, so now he is back at Lambsdorff. And once there, now he is to be tried along with Connolly for trying to escape. Because, yes, they're still going to be tried. They're going to be punished. And typically, yeah. So I want to read a couple things that he says, but I first want to give this. And it's the adjutant who's taking care of this, who is a rather excitable individual. But and there has to be an interpreter there. It was not usual for prisoners on trial to make any defense. As a rule, they were only too content to accept their punishment, generally 2 or 3 weeks in solitary confinement, and let it go. It's like, why bother making waves? You're going to piss people off who could potentially manufacture a way to kill you. But this is Charlie Cow. He's already stood up for himself with those generals. So he knows that it's like, yeah, there were issues there. And he's pressing that here. Because the action is like, yeah, I'm going to punish you, and since you're not going to have anything to say, I'll just give you a sentence. But I do have something to say. Yeah, but I have something to say. He began, relaxing, leaning forward a little. Private Connolly and I have been subjected to grossly inhuman treatment at the prison camp at Stuttgart. We've been kicked, punched, starved, and spat at, contrary to the Geneva Conventions and in direct opposition to the terms of the Hague Treaty of 1926, of which Germany is a signatory. Okay, and this, taken aback, the interpreter gaped at him. So to the adjutant, who, the little man translated the speech to the adjutant, who burst into a roar like a bull and rose to his feet, babbling in his anger until Coward cut him short with an imperious gesture. Furthermore, it stated distinctly in the Hague Treaty that all prisoners of war shall have the right to escape if they should wish to try to do so, and that when recaptured the holding powers should in no wise attempt to treat them in an inhumane manner, meting out only summary justice viz. A term of close imprisonment not exceeding 1 month. So that basically saying, look, it's established. I'm allowed to try to escape if the opportunity presents itself and I want to. So I've not done anything wrong here. But even if you're going to do that, guess what? You're limited to 1 month. More than that, you're violating my rights, very much so. But he does go on. I just didn't highlight this. And it is also, he's pausing so the interpreter can finish. Now I intend as soon as possible to exercise my rights as a British prisoner of war and inform the trustees of the Convention of Geneva of my treatment and that of my comrades at the hands of the Germans. I shall ask for an immediate and full inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the whole affair, unless, that is, you undertake to dismiss the charge against Connolly and myself. Yeah, I mean, true. He's totally just blackmailing the guy, but still, is all his claims are true. Like, if the guy didn't give in, if the adjutant doesn't give in, there would be a full investigation. It would be a problem, and it actually does go on to explain. Because you might be thinking, why? Who cares? The Germans were very shy of any investigations into their treatment of Britishers. They were afraid that reprisals might be carried out against their own men in British hands, and knew that this would go down badly with the German people. This comes up again later as well. Very much so. One of the times that he interacts with German civilians while he's at Auschwitz. And this is... I don't want to go too much into it because it is kind of spoiler territory. But he gets a position, he's essentially a trustee, where he does have a German guard with him, but he will go into town to get certain things for the prisoners. For example, there's a local eye doctor who will visit the POW camp to figure out, okay, here's a situation with your eyes. I'll go back and make up lenses for you, make up the glasses for you. The doctor doesn't return them with the glasses. Instead, they would send Coward down there with a guard to get them and then bring them back. But the exam has to be done by the doctor, but the delivery doesn't have to. But there is actually a moment during this where, as I recall, it's a German woman that starts yelling at him. The German guard starts yelling at her then to not do that. And it is for exactly the point expressed right in this chapter that I just read, that it is, they don't want reprisals. Right? That is that would be terrible, because everything you can do to the POWs you have, guess what? They can do to your POWs as well. Because the situation is equal. That's why the whole honor of war is actually important, because if you have somebody that starts breaking that, then it's, yeah, that's you're inviting problems like you wouldn't believe. Because I mean, it's, again, just talking about, with World War II, the attack on Pearl Harbor being a surprise attack, and prior to the declaration of war being delivered, that pissed off a lot of people, way more than if it was we've decided to declare war on you, and then it was like, a day later that Pearl Harbor was attacked. That's not how the timeline would have been, even if it had been delivered on time, but it still is the surprise nature of that. It's like, whoa, that's not fair. Guess what? We're coming to beat your ass now. And no holds barred kind of thing in that situation as well. But yeah, and it is also, I do just want to mention, because I did see a little bit of Tor recently, and one thing I had to check, and it's like, it seems weird to me, the idea that, okay, so part of the history there, the real history there, was the declaration of war was transmitted to the Japanese ambassador or consulate, something like that, but they were slow in decoding it, so it actually ended up getting delivered after the attack had happened. But apparently the timeline here is, even if it had been delivered immediately, the planes seemed like they would have had to have already been in the air. Like, the attack, they had already been committed. Well, resources were already committed to the attack. Which is like, no, I'm sorry, I still consider that wrong, because you're basically saying then that even if, hypothetically, what if America had surrendered? Are the planes turning around? Are you going to be able to communicate to them not to attack? And when you think about it, that is a hypothetical scenario. So it's like, if you didn't allow for the provisions like that for that event, then guess what? That's just that it would just be a war crime type of attack on a group that hasn't the knowledge that they are at war. So yeah, I mean, yeah. But it is that whole honor of war thing, and that's not to say that that you have to give a heads up kind of thing. But it is just, I mean, and to be fair, obviously, if the Japanese are going to go to war with America in World War II, Pearl Harbor is going to be a target. Hawaii as a whole is going to be a target. So yeah, but it still is. And I don't know, maybe there's just some more to that timeline that I don't know. That would be like, yes, in theory, they could have been called back. That it could have been canceled and not do all this. But yeah, it's just still the surprise nature of the attack. That was inviting all kinds of pain. And I'll also add one other thing that I'll have to check on with some of it. I think we did it in both Germany and Japan. Prior to various bombings, we would actually drop leaflets and such saying, hey, we're going to be bombing, so civilians, get out of here. Like, that is one thing, and some of them do still exist, pamphlets that were dropped telling the Japanese in multiple locations, because we weren't sure where we were going to be bombing yet. I mean, it's like, whether Hiroshima was bombed or a different site would have been determined day of, based on what the weather was. And I think some other factors as well. Not just, the weather's clear, we can go, but also I think they wanted a specific wind because of the potential for fallout being carried in one direction or another. But in any case, they were warned that something was coming. And the Japanese had the ability to react, to evacuate and such, and I'm pretty sure they chose not to on that day. But that was mainly because you've been telling us you'll be bombing us for a while. We're kind of used to the normal stuff, and then was holy shit, this is not the normal stuff. Anyway, where this actually ends, which is not on a tense point, not on a cliffhanger, is a week later, Coward was summoned to the office and handed a cable from Geneva. It's like, what? It's like, wait a minute, I didn't reach out to anyone. No, his wife did. His wife had reached out to the British War Office because it had been months since she had heard anything and was concerned and just wanted a welfare check. And the British War Office did pass it on to Geneva, who then he was like, okay, here's a letter for him, just answering what's up. But yeah, welfare report request on Sergeant Major Coward. A polite Unterofficer, so that would be a corporal, passed him a blank form on which to compose his reply. He wrote, "Pleased to report I am in fairly good health. Cause of not writing through escapade. Treatment after recapture very good." He returned the form to the soldier, who read it carefully. "Thank you, Mr. Coward," he smiled. "Don't mention it, cock." I'm not sure if that's meant as an insult there, or if it's some sort of just British slang that Coward had. So Coward walked back to the piece of his barrack room. So it makes sense to end on that. I just end the chapter there, because it is basically confirming, because this would be his opportunity to say something to Geneva. And he doesn't. So it's like, okay, we know this is over. The Germans know, okay, we don't have to worry about more. So it has basically been left as an internal affair, even though technically, yeah, he could have reported this to Geneva, and things would have happened. And by things would have happened, I imagine it would be along lines of inflaming the British, pissing off Germans, and also, granted, I don't know what it actually amounts to if the protecting power of Switzerland were to find out and do something, because, like, what could they do? But at the same time, news would be a problem, and they would have some ability to demand action from Germany that Germany wouldn't, even the Nazis wouldn't want to just ignore. What they would respond with might be empty gestures, but they would have to do something, because not to, it provokes greater aggression against them in ways that you probably don't want. Like I was mentioning, the whole, it is something that many nations do in war, where they will actually inform when they are bombing civilian targets, certainly, or targets that would include civilians, to say, hey, we're going to be bombing. But it would be like, we're not telling you the time, and it might be in multiple locations, because it's like, hey, we got site A, site B, site C. We'll let all of them know, but they don't know which is site A, which we want to hit, and which are the less important ones. Anyhow. But imagine if they just stopped doing that. I mean, it's like there was bombings in Europe and Japan that it killed a huge number of people, and those very possibly also had those warnings. So imagine if they weren't given the devastation there, and it's like, hey, I don't know how much of that is required by the Geneva Convention or the Hague Treaty, but it still is imagine if that were we're not going to do that anymore. And it's like, because you're treating our guys so badly, it's like, yeah, that would be bad, because if that would happen, the British do it once and say annihilate a town that could have evacuated some, but didn't have the opportunity to, because no warning like that was given. There would be a lot of German people that might be we need to beat them, but also a lot that recognize we kind of deserve that one. And they would get pissed at the government. So, yeah, war is not a time to race to the bottom for how you treat people, because there will always be a new bottom. Alright, I do want to quickly see what's up with at least the start of chapter 10. Okay, it looks like it's just going to be life at Lambsdorff again, so, which is fine. I mean, it can still be very interesting. And as I said, I'm pretty sure we've got one more camp in here that he will be at before Auschwitz. Although maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just Lambsdorff starts taking on Russian POWs as well. But it will be interesting when we get to that. Because the Geneva Convention and Hague... Well, I don't know how much with Hague, but the Geneva Convention will play into that. Because one thing, and I think it's mentioned here, maybe it's just my own rationalization, is Britain and Germany, with the British Empire and Germany, were both signatories of the Hague, and, well, I believe Britain was for the Hague, but also the Geneva Convention, so they do have mutual bonds there. Soviet Union was not a signatory. So that race to the bottom was allowed, technically. Well, at least for Geneva Convention. I'm not sure about the Hague. And at this time. So, yeah, when we get to that treatment, yeah, that's going to be a moment to talk about. See you then. Well, see you next time. Whatever. I don't know when that is. That might be next chapter. Might be later. All right. Goodbye.